Hi everyone, we're back in my office. I thought it was going to rain today. The weather forecast called for like 90% chance of rain, but then in the very early morning a huge windstorm went through and blew all the clouds away. But we're not going to film this outside anyway because the high for today is only 16, so it's kind of chilly out there and it's still a little breezy. 16 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit. Now, this video, we're going to go over how the flower wagon did for spring. Granted, spring goes until June 21st, but in reality, from a flower farming point of view, March, April, and May is spring. June, July, and August is summer. September, October, November is fall. That's the way it works in the flower farm here. So we're going to do a spring review, even though it's just the beginning of June. Now, the flower wagon up on my roadside started earlier this year because for the first time this year I tried selling hyacinths in pots, not as cut flowers. I don't like them as cut flowers. I don't like the smell. They become very, very strong scented when they're cut. They're strong scented when they're growing in the garden or in a pot, but you cut them and that magnifies so much. Anyway, so I grow them in pots. Same as I do my daffodils and tulips, and it's 3 bulbs per pot. So I had ordered back last year in May, because you have to order well in advance if you're ordering wholesale, hyacinths called Miss Saigon that I really liked, and I thought that that would do really well in pots because I know in the stores they sell white, they sell blue, but they don't sell that really pretty purple. Now, as it turns out, I did get a call later on in the summer that they would not have Miss Saigon available and would I take a substitute. I said yes. So they sent me a substitute. I planted up the substitute, and when it came time for it to start blooming, it was not just one color, it was 2 colors. Now it ends up being that was actually quite good that I ended up getting the 2 colors, the sort of burgundy, raspberry color and the blue, because it looked better in the pots with a mix of the 2 colors than if it had just been the one. So I really like that. Look who's here. This is Lila. So I like that. So that was an advantage. So I certainly didn't complain about that. Now, of course, the hyacinths bloomed before the daffodils and tulips, and they bloomed on March 23rd. And that meant that I got my flower wagon up on the road quite a bit earlier than usual, because usually it doesn't end up going up on the road till mid to late April. So I got a whole month in advance with the flower wagon up on the road. The thing I had to find out is, was it worth having the flower wagon up early? So I had ordered the minimum amount of hyacinths that I could, because it was my first time using a wholesaler. And I wanted to go through a year's experience with the wholesaler before I did anything more than minimum orders, just in case it was not a good experience. It ended up being a good experience, so that wasn't a worry that I needed to worry about. Anyway, so I got the minimum order, which was 50 bulbs, and that gave me, let me see if I can look at my notes, how many. Well, 50 divided by 3, what's that? 1 goes into 27, so 16 pots. I think I ended up with 17 pots because I think there was an extra bulb in there, which was good. It'll be further down in my notes. And they all sold out. So it ended up being a really, really good experience. So for next year, I have ordered 3 times as many hyacinths, so 150, and I've ordered them in 3 different colors so that I can do them as individual pots or as mixes, and we'll see how that goes. And it's really pretty. It's yellow, pink, and orange. After the hyacinths, which I sold all of them, the next to bloom was the daffodils, of course, because they come before tulips, although where I live, not that much sooner than the tulips. And they started blooming on April 13th, and the daffodils that I ordered were electrous because I thought they were just stunning. They were more expensive than most of the other ones. I decided to take a gamble on that high cost just to see how they did. And I started selling them before they actually opened, same as the tulips, because people were stopping to buy the hyacinths. And I did have always 3 daffodils and 3 tulips up at the flower wagon. So I did sell some of the daffodils and tulips prior to them opening because my signage had images of them, and if I still had my signage I'd show it to you, but season for those is over and I tossed the sign. Out of the 28 pots of daffodils, I sold 22, which left me for 6 pots of daffodils to put in inventory for next year's sales. So next year I'm buying 2 types of daffodils, but I'll have 6 pots of the Electris, so that I will have 2 different varieties of 22 pots plus 6 of the Electris. So that'll give me a little bit more of a potential to selling more, because people quite often, if they have more than one variety, they'll buy more than one. And daffodils do well in pots, so the 6 pots that were left over will do perfectly fine next year. Now this is where I have to really start looking at my notes. So the Electris daffodils were 95 cents each, which I had done back in the fall, or tulips and pots profitable, and I had done a breakdown of the costs of putting tulips into a pot and getting it ready for the next season for the flower wagon. So I know that with the tulips, it costs me $5 to get the tulip pot ready to sit in the garden and sit and wait and do its thing until spring, when it started to grow and when it was time for me to start taking it to the flower wagon. So $5 included the cost of the tulips, the cost of the 1-gallon pots, which I buy used from nurseries. I had a supplier where I could buy them for 50 cents. I just found a new supplier where I can buy them for 25 cents, so that's quite a bit of a difference. But this was based on 50 cents for the 1-gallon pots. The soil, I create my own soil, so there's no material cost for that. And then there's my labor to put it all together in a pot with the soil. And I charge my labor out at $30 an hour. So $5 for tulips to get to the stage of pre-flower wagon. Now the Electris daffodils, like I said, were 95 cents each. So with an adjustment for the cost of the daffodil bulbs, that gave me a profit to that point of just prior to taking it up to the flower wagons of $3.26. I have 2 dogs here that are possibly going to knock my phone over any second. Okay, no, off. Now I'm getting distracted. Where am I? Yeah, so I consider $30 an hour a minimum to charge for your own labor when you are the small business owner, because if you hire somebody else to work for you, you want to be able to know that you can make a profit off of their labor. So, sorry, the dog just knocked my phone stand, so it just wobbled. That was Leela. So that's why I consider $30 an hour a minimum, because I know that whatever profit I make, if I hire somebody else to do the actual labor at $20 an hour, let's say, just, you know, like grunt labor, $20 an hour. Our minimum wage here in BC, Canada is $17 and something an hour. So to round it up to 20, I'll know that I will still make a profit of $10 an hour on the labor that I'm paying out, which means that in theory my extra money is higher, not lower. Anyway, okay, let's leave that alone. And so the flower wagon had a daily labor cost of $5 per day to stock the wagon in the morning and then unstock it in the evening. There are 30 days in April, because this is the month that the daffodils were blooming. So that translates to $150 in labor to stock and unstock the flower wagon for that month. However, I was also selling tulips in April, and the flower wagon is there, even though it had other stuff in it. The flower wagon was there in April to sell daffodils and tulips. So 50% of that labor goes to daffodils and 50% goes to tulips. So that means my labor costs for the flower wagon for the month of April for daffodils is $75. I sold 22 pots of daffodils at a profit of $3.26 each, which adds up to $71.72. Less the daffodils share of the flower wagon labor means I had a loss of $3.28, and that really shocked me, because when I looked at the numbers, there is nothing I could do to turn that really into a positive because I only had about 6 pots left over. So that tells me that I absolutely should not be buying expensive daffodil bulbs like that. But still, a loss of $3.28 on my $30 an hour labor. I'll take that. So then, if I compare that with the hyacinths, so the hyacinths gave me a total profit of $34.02, and that's after the flower wagon labor. And that included tips that I got for the month of March as well. So I was ahead in the profit spot of $34.02. So my loss for daffodils of $3.28 means I'm still ahead by $30.74, which doesn't sound like much, but don't forget I have accounted for all of my labor, which at $30 an hour. So I paid myself $30 an hour for absolutely everything I've done, and I'm still ahead $30.74. So that's actually really good, because if I was paying somebody to do it at $20 an hour, clearly my profit would be even higher. So after the tulips, after the daffodils comes the tulips, which are also part of the April sales. The tulip bulbs are cheap in comparison to the daffodil bulbs. I think they were 39 cents each, like not quite a third less. So the profit per pot was $5 pre-flower wagon. I sold 15 pots, leaving me with a profit of $75. But the 50% of the flower wagon labor is $75. So I broke even. I completely broke even. There was no profit, there was no loss. My wages were paid for, the materials were paid for, and above and below that, nothing. It was absolutely even. So that meant my profit stayed at $30.74. However, for the month of April, I also did get some tips. I got some tips of $8.62. So I actually finished off the month with a total profit to date for the year of $39.36, up $5.34 from March. And again, that's after paying myself $30 an hour. Because remember, if the tulip bulbs are 39 cents and there's 3 in a 1 gallon pot, that's approximately $1.17 plus 50 cents for the pot. So $1.67 in actual hard costs for a pot. But I'm calling that $5 because of my labor. So, see, look at that how you want. I actually made lots of money, or I paid myself my labor at a good wage and had a tiny little profit left over. So missing from my flower wagon sales this year, which was really, really unfortunate, was my camellia bouquets, which I had been selling for the 2 previous years. The camellia bush that I have has been really, really prolific with really, really large blooms, and I have paired it with cherry branches just starting to blossom, and they sell as they were selling as soon as I was putting them out to the wagon. But I don't know what happened this year. The flowers were small, not small, but much smaller, and very fragile. You just touch them and they fall off. The only thing I can think of is that we had one night that was way colder than we normally get, like way, way colder. I think it was minus 17 Celsius, and we just don't get those temperatures. We usually hover around minus 3 Celsius, with the odd night getting maybe minus 6, minus 7, but minus 17, unheard of. So the camellia may not have liked that. That's the only thing I can think of. But, who knows? So that brings us to May. So I was just re-watching my video clips to make sure that I didn't have to refilm anything. And I realized that I forgot to mention what my takeaway on the tulips were, because my sales weren't as good as they should have been or have been in past years. And just change my position. And I realized that the reason for that is I chose only one tulip because I'm doing it wholesale. Before I was buying them at a really, really good price because of the volume that I was buying, but it was still retail, so it was like 30% off. But I could buy whatever I wanted, so I was buying a bunch of different things. So I had lots of color up at the flower wagon of the tulips that I was selling prior. This year, because it was the first year I did wholesale and I only bought one type of tulip, it was one color. And that color, because it was a creamy yellow with a little bit of red striation in it, not a lot of red striation, from a distance, didn't look really any different. Like if you're driving by, it just looked like I had daffodils up there. So that was a huge error on my part on the tulip that I chose, because it didn't put out a blast of color other than daffodil color. So lesson learned, and I will not be purchasing tulips that have a very similar undercolor to the bulk of the tulip of yellow, because it blends in too much with the daffodils. Now, back to the rest of my video. May was a very strange month this year. Last year we had a heat wave. I considered that to be a strange month because the temperatures last year were quite a bit warmer. We actually were getting up to 30 degrees Celsius, which is, we usually get up to about 23 Celsius in May. This year, it was the opposite. It was cold. Well, with the exception of a few days, which just seemed to always happen. The good, nice days always seem to be happening on the days that I filmed, so it always looked nice. But we had a lot of rain, we had a lot of wind, and we only got above 20 degrees Celsius, maybe 2 days in the whole month. It was unnaturally cold. So, whoa, 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 that was Esri. So it was a strange month. I had, the tulips had finished because we were quite warm towards the end of April, and the tulips finished, the daffodils had finished. So I didn't have them to sell, and normally I actually have tulips and daffodils to sell in the first first 2 weeks of May. I didn't have any late tulips. I don't know, that might have been one reason why. I had no flowers for the first 2 weeks of May. What I had was my potted up pre-started dahlia plants. What I also had was I had started 12 tomato plants, and I only planted 6. So I decided to put the other 6 up to the flower wagon just as an experiment. I've never done that before. Really wasn't the best weather to have either the dahlias or the tomatoes up there because of how cold it was. But I had planted my dahlias and they were doing fine, so I could use that as an example of it's fine to plant them all because they were all hardened off. And then I didn't have much of anything else. I didn't have anything to make a bouquet with for the first half of May. I didn't have anything to do little pop can arrangements with. So I decided I would put my art cards into the flower wagon, and I would go ahead and get the, well, I already had gone ahead and gotten some little vases and things up there to sell. And yeah, so what I ended up selling for the month of May, if I look at my notes here again, is I sold 13 started dahlia plants for $12 each, which I thought was really good considering how crappy the weather was. I usually sell them for May and June, so I should probably sell quite a few more this month just because the weather is, well, the clouds blew all those clouds, the wind blew all the clouds away, and we are now supposed to be starting to get into a heat dome, which means the temperature is going to really warm up finally. And we won't be getting any rain, at least not in the forecast for the next 2 weeks. So that means the flower wagon will really start to pick up. I sold 3 of the 6 tomatoes that I put out there. I had 1 stolen. And the other 2 I managed to break. Don't ask me how, but I did. So they're fine, but I accidentally broke off the tops, so they're just kind of recovering. They might go back out there when they're recovered. I also sold, where am I here? 25 gift cards, so that was a good deal to put those out. And I sold 5 little vases, so that was pretty good too. Oh, sorry, 4 vases, not 5. So I can't break any of this down for profitability until this, hello you, until the season for each one of those things is over, and it's not. I'm still going to be selling the potted dahlias till the end of June. I still have, I could figure out the tomatoes, but they were just kind of I had them, so I put them out there as an experiment, and I only had 6, and I only sold 3, had 1 stolen. I'm not going to figure out the profitability of that. I could, but it's really not worth it. The little vases, the vases that I sell, that's going to go all season, so I can't figure out profitability on that. The gift cards, I did not figure out the profitability on that yet, but I will say that was profitable having them out there. I will say that where are we here? The gift cards, they accounted for at least 2 weeks of the flower wagon costs, labor. I will say that I could look at the 3 tomatoes that I sold. I guess you can't see me. At the 3 tomatoes that I sold as just about covering a 3rd week, and the vases that I sold just about or more covering the 4th week, with the difference in what I paid and what I sold them for. But I haven't worked any of that out yet. So May is basically covered with all the various things that I sold. But it's not something that I've sat down and worked out yet. Now, halfway through the month, I did finally start getting some peonies. You think I would have gotten the ranunculus and the anemones before the peonies, and I was counting on having them for Mother's Day. I even started them early enough, backing up from last year, so that I would have them for Mother's Day. I've still only cut a handful of ranunculus and not much more in the anemones, but I have been able to cut, well, I should say handfuls, probably a few handfuls, but I have managed to cut enough of those that towards the end of the month I was able to finally start doing my pop can arrangements, and I settled excuse me, I settled on a formula that I really like, because I wasn't getting very many of them. So 1 ranunculus or anemone, sorry, 2 ranunculus or anemones, whichever combination in whatever color was available, and 1 astilbe frond, because that looked really good and people really liked that. As soon as I went to that one, I had been doing it with hosta leaves, and they weren't getting purchased as quickly as when I swapped over to the astilbe leaves, which is why I swapped over, because I didn't think that they were selling as quickly as they should be. As soon as I switched to the astilbe leaves, they started selling quickly. So I also, of course, started doing my peony bouquets really only 2 weeks ago, so about halfway through May. And I was only getting a few blooms a day. So in the beginning, oops, that was Leela. Here's Leela. So I was only getting a couple of blooms a day, really. Luckily, the red rhododendron that I use for bouquets in May, if I can, was also blooming. So, come on, you guys, you're gonna knock my phone over. There. Sit. Good dog. Anyway, so I was doing 2 peonies and 2 rhododendrons with a bunch of, whoa, there we go, with a bunch of filler. Okay, I'm gonna pause you guys and put the dogs out of my room. Hang on. Sorry about that, but my phone's gonna start going flying any second. Now they're gonna be whining at the door to my office. Yeah, so with a bunch of fillers, and I showed you the recipe that I used for that in my next level peony bouquet recipe video that I did. Was that last week only? That was just last week. So once the rhododendron finished, which it did, pretty much started finishing about a few days after I had filmed that video. So then I had to start relying on more peonies, and luckily the peonies did pick up a bit. So I replaced the 2 rhododendrons with peonies, so I was doing 4 peonies for a bit. But then we got much colder and wetter again, so now I'm down to 3 peonies in a bouquet, adding in a couple of ranunculus if they're there. I mean, I'm scrambling just to see what I have. I just got my first foxglove today. Anyway, so the bouquets were doing okay because the weather's been atrocious. I'm amazed when people stop in the rain to buy anything. But then you'll get one day of sun, and then, you know, your sales will be over $100, so that's a good day. And then you'll get rain, and, you know, you're lucky to sell anything, but yet some days you do. So I can't go into the profitability on the peony bouquets because realistically, they're not profitable at all. I have to pay for the peonies first, and they're just in their 4th year. So I was only getting a few blossoms last year. So all the peonies that I had planted, which is only a total of 8 plus 6, 14? 2, 4, 6, 8, and 6, 14, yeah, which is only a total of 14. I still, you know, they have to get paid for, and they have not been paid for yet. So I have to factor that in before I figure out anywhere where there's a profitability of peonies. And the ranunculus, I did pretty good on the ranunculus. What did I sell on the ranunculus? Let me look through my notes here. I sold 11 pop can arrangements, so at $4 a pop can, or 3 for $10. They're doing okay, but again, they've just started as well, so it's impossible to figure out any profitability on them. I can't, so I'm not breaking down any costs on that stuff. Look, I use recycled paper. This was my, this is my pre-started daily price sheet with a spelling mistake on it, so I didn't use it. Now, as I'm looking at my notes, oh, that's right. I knew there was something in my notes that I wanted to remember that I hadn't said. There is a really cool bonus with the peonies. So when I cut the peonies to use in the bouquets, I strip off the leaves and I toss them. But now when I strip off the side buds, I'm saving them and putting them in water, because after about a week, they start to open up, and I use those short-stemmed peony flowers in my pop cans as well as single stems of peonies for $4. And you would never be able to use them in a bouquet because the stems are only about this long, you know, somewhere in this range, depending on which one it is. And so that's just a huge bonus to be able to sell them as full peony flowers in a pop can for $4 or 3 for $10. I did not realize that you could take a completely closed bud, like completely shut. I'll put the picture up on the screen where you can see how closed the bud is on the one stem and what they kind of look like when they open up. So that was kind of exciting to figure that one out. So the lack of flowers in May brings up a couple of huge pluses. Which the first one is my Globe Master Alliums. Now I bought Ambassador Alliums, Globe Master Alliums, and Hair Alliums. Now the Hair Alliums are going to be used just for some fun funkin' bouquets. The Ambassador Alliums I wanted to use in bouquets as a feature flower. The Globe Masters, because they're bigger, I was going to use them as single stems and sell them. However, the Globe Masters opened way before the Ambassadors, as in they've been open for a while, 2 weeks, and the Ambassadors are just starting to open. So I needed them for my bouquets. So that was a huge plus to accidentally have those available for use in my peony / rhododendron arrangements for the bouquets. So that was really, really good. The other bonus was my kale plant, my one kale plant that did not die last year. I mean, it went to seed and flowered last year and should have died at that point. Didn't. Produced kale all summer, fall, and winter for the dog food that we make for our dogs, because kale is really healthy for dogs. And then in May, it went to flower again. So I was able to use those flowers, and they, because of the way they kind of are sprawling all over the place, they added some real interesting whimsy to the bouquets. Because most people don't leave their kale to flower. Most people don't even know they're kale flowers. So the other thing that was a real bonus was my ability to rely heavily on filler foliage, none of which I grow on my own property. So the maple leaves, the pine branches, and the cherry branches all are available to me, but they're not from my property. And what I'm using now, which is snowberry branches, is also not on my property, but it's sending shoots out under our fence. I have to prune that stuff out of there anyway, so I'm able to use those, just like with the rhododendrons. The rhododendron that I use is not on our property, but I need to prune it anyway, so I get to use those blossoms. We do have a rhodo on our property. It's a pale pink one. You've probably seen it. It does not have good vase life, so I don't use that particular one in arrangements at all. Okay, let me see what else I got in here. So yeah, the pop can arrangement. So this was something that I had planned on. I ordered quite a few more ranunculus and anemones than I had last year. Last year was sort of an experimental year to see whether I liked them or not. And I thought I would order more of them, quite a few more of them for this year, so that I would be able to get my pop cans going early, which is what I did. And that was a huge success. So I was really, really happy with that. So this month is set to be dry and warm, so I expect blooms and sales to really pick up. I think the snapdragons, they're just starting to get little tiny buds on them, so I think they should be starting to bloom soon. The bachelor buttons, I've had like 2 stems that I've been able to cut, which means they should be getting ready to go soon. I really do hope the snapdragons start, because I don't know how, with this warmer weather, the peonies are liable to all just open up. I don't have cooler space. I don't have an extra fridge. I don't want to deal with getting an extra fridge just to store the peonies, maybe when I have more blooming, but I certainly didn't do that for this year. So I'm hoping the snapdragons will get going sooner rather than later, so that I have those available as well. Now, I have talked a lot about the hyacinths being profitable, but I didn't do any breakdown on that. If you want to see how I do the breakdown on the hyacinths, I did do a video on hyacinths profitability where I break it down in great detail, and I'll put that link up here. After you've watched that one, it will link to our tulips and pots profitable, which goes over the original costs of getting it all ready before it goes into stasis mode, waiting for the flower wagon in the spring. So, but I don't need to put that one up here because it will be linked at the end of the hyacinths video. So what I'll do is I'll put a link to my fall bulb orders that I did for this year, so you can see how now I had to order those in May. So if I was ordering them now, I'd probably make a couple of changes. But based on where I thought I was getting with the hyacinth, daffodils, and tulips and everything else, you'll see the bulbs that I ordered for planting this fall for next spring's flower wagon in the video down here. See you guys next week. Bye.